I think it's very hard or difficult to be resistant toward a system if you don't understand the system.
Maybe it's more reflecting on technology rather than being seduced by it, reflecting on bias within our culture rather than perpetuating it, and maybe all of that reflecting adds up to a kind of resistance.
Museen werden oft für Tempel des Schönen gehalten, das sind sie nebenbei. Aber sie sind Orte des Diskurses über das, was uns heute bewegt oder bewegen muss. Und insofern ist Resistant Faces eine Ausstellung über Kunst heute, die sich mit heutigen medialen Themen auseinandersetzt. Mit dem Gesicht, dem Menschen, seiner Erkennbarkeit oder Wiedererkennbarkeit, seiner Verfolgbarkeit.
Wenn wir heute an das Porträt, eine der Königsdisziplinen der klassischen Kunstgeschichte, vor allem der Malerei, denken, fällt uns wahrscheinlich zunächst das Social-Media-Phänomen Selfie ein. In der von mir konzipierten Ausstellung ging es aber nicht nur um veränderte Bilddistributionen, sondern vor allem um die Fragestellung, wie digitale Technologien bereits beim Programmierungsprozess auf die Vorstellung von menschlicher Identität und Individualität einwirken.
The first photograph that Adam and I actually ever made together was a very transgressive portrait. It was a photograph of a woman under anesthetic. And we spent a lot of time getting permission to make this portrait. And like I said, this picture still felt transgressive even though we had asked all of the right permissions, we kind of got up on a stool and leaned over this woman and took a photograph of her while she was like deeply asleep under medication. And it felt violent, and it felt violent to display the work and to show the work afterwards. I went off to Moscow with this idea of making these portraits using this technology that ended up being Spirit is a Bone. And I arrived in Moscow and I met up with these engineers that had developed this system for photographing people on the streets of Moscow, a surveillance system that was really ingenious. It was able to, as any citizen kind of navigated through the city, this machine was able to gather different aspects of their face. As they turned a corner, it would capture the right part of their face, and if they turned left, it captured the other side, and it was able to kind of take all these pieces and put them together in what is essentially a kind of photo collage. How this was a portrait made without the permission or even the knowledge of the subject. It struck me that this kind of technology was eroding or reshaping our ideas of privacy completely.
In 2010, an anthropology professor adapted his Pentagon-funded research for forecasting battlefield casualties in Iraq to predicting crime for American police departments. Based on the predictions of earthquakes and aftershocks, he created a revolutionary algorithm capable of stopping crime before it occurred. He named it PredPol, short for predictive policing. His program claims to have reduced crime in some areas by 27%. Law enforcement agencies throughout the world, including the UK, the Netherlands, China, and this year, Korea, acquired it.
Diese Bilddatenbanken werden genutzt, auch für Überwachungszwecke. Und beunruhigenderweise sind diese Technologien allerdings alles andere als neutral. So scheitern beispielsweise Gesichtserkennungssoftwares bei Fotoautomaten oftmals der Fall daran, Bilder dunkelhäutiger Frauen zu erkennen, weil sie vornehmlich mit Fotografien weißer Männer gespeist werden.
Yeah, well, surveillance is it's a different kind of a portrait, I guess. It's what you can catch with preset cameras, external cameras. And Shadow Stalker talks about the invasion of our privacy and the use of cameras to take our faces and use facial recognition and other circumstances to really to entrap us.
Here's how it works. Officers are given maps with red squares indicating where a crime will occur. The algorithms are based on past crimes. Police patrol the 500 by 500 foot square locations looking for suspects. Most often, they're in low-income districts. Shooting or arresting people inside of an invisible red square is one example of what Memento deemed algorithmic violence.
But there's also the matters of what happens internally, digitally, that isn't external cameras. Like if you go to an ATM, then they have all of your record. If you walk through a turnstile in an airport, they have information that comes up there. So it's the digital information is a kind of a portrait that accumulates, and it could be wrong. It could be mismatched. It could be the information of somebody else, and you would never know because you don't know that it's happening. And I think that this is a really pernicious and dangerous element of capturing our digital profiles that we need to become aware of. I think that you could resist just by knowing about that something is happening, by information that you have. By letting other people know, and that becomes an active moment, an active work.
Ideological isn't something new, and Adam and I made a work a few years ago about Kodak and also Polaroid that really speaks to that. The idea that early color photography was inherently racist. How can a piece of technology be racist? You know, it was quite simple. It was better at rendering the tones of white skin than black skin.
Portraits are important because it places the Black subject at the center. Historically, Black people have been made invisible, or they have been relegated to the margins and represented in a stereotyped way. Portraits, to me, therefore speaks to taking control, or the possibility of taking control. And also the possibility to create and recreate new narratives and identities.
I mean, of course, when you think about portrait, you think about photography, and you think about images of a person, for example, or a representation of a person. In my practice, I'm dealing with scientific visualizations, and specifically with scientific visualizations of the brain. What you see is a very colorful structure. Follow the brain movements, and while you're doing this and while you get more and more into this relaxed state of mind, you will learn the story about a specific methodology that was developed allegedly by the CIA. What kind of images or imaginaries we have when we think about the brain? So how do we imagine the brain to look like and to function? And I was looking at two metaphors in particular, and that was one, the metaphor of the brain as a vessel. So as if it is just hardware where all the information gets then filled in. And the metaphor of brain activity as something that is lightening up. So the classical bulb, that if you have an interesting thought, something is lightening up. My approach is a critical one. I'm questioning very much all these trajectories in our contemporary society of focusing so much on self-optimization. So if you're not fitting anymore perfectly into all these demands, on the high workload, on insecurities, etc. in society, then the narratives in our societies is, oh, maybe you should just do a little bit more yoga, or maybe You could also just organize, or you create more unions, organize among the people and then change the system.
I started looking at people and I decided to take photographs of people's eyes with a macro lens, so just focusing on their eyes. And the photographs were shot on pickled film, which is what I usually do with most of my photography. I think over a period of 6 months, I had taken pictures of a lot of friends' eyes and people I don't even know. At the same time, I was thinking a lot about the way history is written and how it's written by usually, first of all, people who could write, but also people who had power, people who won wars and rulers. And I was thinking a lot about all the other histories that we know nothing about, all the populations and masses who were individuals and had their own personal lives and had their own emotions and events happen in their lives. These people had stories that were never told. And I wanted to make a piece that combines those two ideas together. So I try to find these things, how to speak with images, how to communicate with images, also trying to understand what people are thinking about and how they're feeling at any given point in time.
The Memento Theory starts actually really with the question of the portrait, but the portrait of the audience or the viewer, these strange roles that we endorse as being a citizen in a world that is not just a flow of information like on television, but also wish for us to partake in the information and to basically communicate and be active about it. So this is really a question of, it starts with this reflection on the activity of the viewer. While I was discovering these plates in the newspaper factory, a few days before the shooting of Orlando occurred in a nightclub, a terrorist act. And the picture that was chosen from the newspaper that I was in contact with was the faces of people who were in the aftermath coming together to witness, pay homage. But the photographer had selected quite ambiguously the faces of two women in the crowd and framed them as a very, kind of very sensual way. And so at first I wanted to use only the image that this specific newspaper had already used. And then suddenly it presents itself as a monochrome, but depending on the light and how it plays with it, you can see the image reappear. The digital revolution has really transformed emotion into currency somehow. Switching to video sculpture 14 Shudder that is at Pinacothek, there I focus on another type of image, which are not so far away than the reporting image, like the one presented in Memento, which is the stock footage industry. The stock footage industry creates millions of short video clips, which are produced by professional filmmaker and videographer whose job could be exclusively to construct image that would express every type and aspect of life, like the most satisfying, but also the most distressful. So, and you will have this bank that you're almost like digging out flows of images, which are highly generic in their structure and content and design, because they need to be able to blend seemingly to create narrative together. They are almost like little bits of sentences. And so I started to dig in the stock footage industry by looking of keywords that express trauma, basically. So post-traumatic disorder, suicide tendency, the war and terrorism and fear. And then started to build a dream-like film and the kind of story that looks a bit surreal of a Marines that is half alive, half dead and things. I think that the notion that we live as actor and spectator in a world of image, then we have to be aware of that and I guess be aware of the responsibility of being that spectator.
For this project, I created street scenes in which I tried to get the viewer to define the anomalies within these scenes, thinking about what is normal behavior and what is deviant, or try to define deviant behavior through algorithms. Within these scenes, I focus on body language and movement of individual people. like the history of photography has been very controlling, and now these new technologies coming in doesn't sort of highlights that, but it's not new. Well, they say that knowledge is power, and I think that is really what I tried to do with this project. Because of my own lack of understanding of like how do these algorithms work and how can I actually visualize systems that are so abstract and so unknown to most of us, I'm really searching for ways to sort of relate to technology like artificial intelligent cameras on a more human level.
Why do we witness a surge of misogynist practices at the very inception of the modern world? Today, footage of the murder of witches can be downloaded from the internet. Self-appointed witch finders report the use of computers to unmask witches. Globalization is a process of recolonization.
And the excitement of ownership is a piece actually that surrounds, first of all, I would say different politics of faciality. No, what is the face actually mean for not only for systems of facial recognition, but also for politics of installing and perpetuating a certain type of female identity. The case of my work. In the one channel, we see like a series of dolls, sex dolls, dolls that have been created with the purpose of sexual purposes, for commercial ends, that have been inserted artificial intelligence. So they don't only are supposed to play the part of the expectation on the female body and how those normative bodies are constructed, but also actually how we are supposed to function and how we are supposed to be in a certain mood and cognitive abilities or not. So this is what you see in the one channel when you see the installation. In the second channel, you have a video essay in which I question and interrogate different representations of female politicians in the political sphere, in the public sphere. So I try to make a little excursus through these different moments in history in which female politicians or female speaking in the public sphere have been silenced, and why this idea of a female politician having to embody a more male attribute through the costumes through this regulation trousers. It also goes into the deep entanglement between extractivist practices, basically, and the systemic violence against female bodies that is connected to that.
Das Schöne an der Auswahl der Künstlerinnen und Künstler in Resistant Faces ist, dass es eine sehr große Spannbreite abbildet. Es gibt sehr, sehr junge Positionen, es gibt aber auch schon sehr gesetzte Positionen innerhalb der Fotografie und Medienkunst. Und sie alle beschäftigen sich auf sehr, sehr vielfältige Art und Weise mit dem Thema Porträt, und das nicht nur inhaltlich sehr vielfältig, sondern auch innerhalb der materialen Ausformung am Ende.
Eine wichtige Überlegung in der Ausstellung war, zu zeigen, dass Fotografie alles andere heutzutage bedeuten kann als klassische Prints an der Wand, und auch, dass es verschiedene Ästhetiken gibt, dass diese Auseinandersetzung eben nicht nur der Generation der Millennial-Künstlerinnen und Künstler vorbehalten ist, sondern dass sich ganz dringende Fragestellungen in verschiedene gesellschaftliche, aber eben auch mediale Bereiche hineinbegeben.
Resistant Faces wurde aufgebaut in der Phase der Pandemie. Dass wir diese Ausstellung jetzt hier haben können, verdankt sich der 100%igen Finanzierung durch die Alexander Turczek Stiftung. Dafür sind wir sehr, sehr dankbar. Ohne diese Stiftung wäre das nicht möglich gewesen. Und ich denke, dass der Film die Möglichkeit bietet, es über den Tag hinaus, über das Jahr hinaus erlebbar zu machen. Resistant Faces, das ist eine Ausstellung von heute, aus einer schwierigen Zeit, zu einem heiklen Thema und dadurch von hoher Relevanz.